Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Griffin. I'm the Center for Active Living Director at Athens Community Council on Aging. So glad you're here with us today. This is the last installment of a 5-part series we've been doing this month. It's been Older Americans Month this May, for essential resources for adult children caring for parents and loved ones. So today is our last one of the series. And just to remind everyone, this is part of a larger series that's going on in Athens this month. We're being sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read program. And the book that was selected this year is this wonderful graphic memoir called Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant? Oh, yay, you've got your copy. I do have copies for anyone who's registered today. Otherwise, go to your local bookseller, Avid, for example. And it's by Roz Chast. She's the New Yorker cartoonist, and it's such a fabulous medium to talk about difficult things. It's her experience caring for her older parents through the end of their life. And it's touching and funny and poignant and sad and really creatively put together and really strikes a chord. So, a lot of the themes in the book have been inspiration for us in designing our webinar series, the issues of caregiving, parenting, aging, what it means and what it looks like to age and live well. So that's kind of like what's been going on behind the scenes is this wonderful event series too. So today we're focusing on an issue that's really important to me and a lot of my friends actually, is caring for loved ones, whether they're close by or far away. And I'm so thrilled to have our special guest today. So Dr. Kerstin Emerson is a clinical associate professor at the University of Georgia's Institute of Gerontology. Welcome. And Megan Vogt is the program manager for the Aging and Disability Resource Connection at the Northeast Georgia Area Agency on Aging. I should know all that by heart.
No, it's okay. It is a lot of words.
Yeah, well, you guys do such great things. And I thought we could just start out really broadly. I know you all through ACCA because we're in the aging services field, but I feel like a lot of people don't know about what you do at your agency or institution. So if you don't mind just like introducing yourselves a little bit more, telling us about what you do and what you all do where you are, that'd be a great way to start.
Okay, awesome.
Megan, go ahead. And yeah, Megan.
Okay, great. My name is Megan. I am, and my last name is Vogt. Thank you. I always, when I'm talking to people on the phone, I just say Megan. So I apologize for the lack of formality. We really try to meet people where they are and talk to them just like they're our friends, our family. But we are the Northeast Georgia Area Agency on Aging. And so we are located here in Athens. We're located here on the east side, 305 Research Drive. We are happy to see you if you want to come and talk to us face to face. Most of our services are provided over the phone. So we provide information, referrals, and assistance to inform about programs and services for older adults, individuals with disabilities, and caregivers. So we are the one-stop shop for you to find out anything that you need to find out about aging resources. What are the programs and services to support this population to remain independent in the community? And so that is our mission, and our goal is to, if for anyone who wants to stay in the community independently, how can we help make that happen? Most people want to age in place in their own home, and we want to provide you with the resources on how to be able to do that. So we can inform about the programs and services that are available for that, the eligibility criteria, and then we can determine your eligibility for those programs. And then our agency, we have funding to provide services like Meals on Wheels, personal support services, and we contract with organizations such as our senior centers, the Center for Active Living, Athens Community Council on Aging for some other services. We work with 2 home care provider companies, Always Caring and Help at Home, for our grant-funded services. And then we also work with our Medicaid program that provides more comprehensive supportive services. And all of that sounds like, every time I talk about it, it's like we're going one way, we're going the other. It is a lot of different stuff and a lot of different things to know. and it is extremely overwhelming, and our goal is to try to make that a little bit less overwhelming. Our staff is experienced, and we've been working with these programs for a long time, and so we try to break it down for everybody about how to access those services.
Well, you're the people we come to also when we have a question, because we can't get to everything. So yeah, you guys do so much, and we're so grateful to have you in the community doing what you do.
Thank you.
Kirsten, tell us about the
you.
Institute.
Thanks. This is so great to hear, Megan, because I know that they do so many things, and then every time she mentions, I'm like, you also do this and you do this, and it's amazing because she can have this wide range of knowledge, but help people like just narrow it down. Here's what you need to have, right? This very moment in your kind of, a lot of times it's crisis, but even just in your need right now, here's what you need. Get rid of the extraneous things, and Megan and her staff are incredibly amazing at that. So I'm so pleased to be here with them. So I'm Kerstin, and I also go by first names, unless you really want to call me Dr. Emerson. I don't think we need to. We're pretty informal around here. And I work at the University of Georgia, and I teach gerontology to undergraduates and graduate students in the College of Public Health, which is one of my true pleasures. I love doing that because there's nothing like teaching about aging to an 18-year-old. And then we do research at the University of Georgia quite a bit, including with cognition and vision and other kinds of research for older adults. And then our last mission is really outreach and doing some of these things where we try to go out in the community and talk to people and, bring resources to you, but also figure out what it is that you need, and tell you a little bit about what we do know about, especially research and what kind of the science says. And one of our jobs that we feel like is to translate some of that science of here's what we know works, here's what we think would be really helpful in these situations. You don't need to read scientific journal articles. We can tell you in normal everyday language what it is that you might need to know. So we kind of have three missions at the Institute of Gerontology of teaching kind of future aging services workers, teaching research, as well as kind of community outreach and education. So I'm thrilled to be here today. It's always really a pleasure to work with the ACCA.
Thanks, likewise. And yeah, we love getting into the young folks, getting our interns from UGA on campus with us, interning with us, and then exposing, because when I was growing up, I didn't even know gerontology was a word. So, so it's fantastic what you're doing. Thank you. So I really wanted to start off, speaking of research, I know you've done a lot of research, Kerstin, in sort of social isolation, loneliness among older adults. Let's just reflect for a minute on the COVID year. I mean, this was so difficult for parents and their children, for everyone, but I mean, especially if people are living far apart, and even if they were living in the same town, not being able to see each other. So, and for some people, nothing really changed in terms of isolation. So you want to talk about that, just, some of the research you've done and how that fits into the frame of COVID and, where we are now and maybe what we can look towards next,
Yeah. So it's such an important point that you brought out. So even people who were, caregiving or being local, all of a sudden everything became long distance, right? Your neighbor became long distance during COVID. And so it really shone a light on what people were probably already struggling with before, and it really exacerbated it for those people. And then it created a problem for some who had not had this issue. And what's interesting is I've studied loneliness for about 10, 15 years, and people used to not care about it. I would tell people that was my research topic, and they'd be like, it's too bad. Some older adults are lonely. But now in the last year, man, have people really figured out that it's a big deal, and it always has been, right? People have been isolated and lonely, and it's not good for most humans. So most people, with personalities aside, most people really need social contact, and a lot of it, maybe more than we ever realized until it went away. And for a lot of people, it was just natural. It's not something they thought about, but when you think about it is when it's not there and when your needs aren't being met. So some people have high social needs and they need lots of engagement, but even those with low social needs still need something. And in the last year, it's really shown us that no matter what your age, social isolation is really terrible. And the research has been there for the last 10, 20 years. Not as many people have cared, but now they care. But the research has really shown that it's linked to obviously mental health issues, right? If you're stressed, if you're lonely, it's going to impact how you feel about your motivation, but even your physical health. So your immune system decreases. You can't fight illnesses as well, which during COVID, that was pretty important, right? But also things like your blood pressure goes up. People are seeing doctors more. It's early admittance to nursing homes. And then one study even found that you're more likely to die early if you're socially isolated for a long time. So that's pretty dramatic, right? This research really shows how big of a deal it is. And in the last year, I think we all have personally realized just how big of a deal it is. And so in some ways, there's nothing good about COVID, but the one kind of silver lining might be a stretch, but the one slightly positive is that it's shining a light on what we know is a really big issue. And so lots more people are kind of on board with, hey, this is a problem. Let's do interventions. Let's figure out what it is that people need. And it's something we can address, right? This is something that I've always liked about the topic is we can do something about loneliness. I personally can't do anything about a lot of terrible things in this world, but I can come up with pretty good interventions that we know work for loneliness. And so that's kind of been really exciting for me.
What are some of those interventions that you feel like are really effective and were used in COVID, could be used going forward?
Yeah, right. And I think that's been kind of interesting. People have got more creative in the last year. Things that I didn't even really think about in the last year have started to be used. I mean, technology is one, right? We're connecting on Zoom today and we're all in the same city, but far away from each other. I think technology has been a huge jump in the last year. Obviously, it cuts some people out, right? People who don't have good internet connection, who can't afford certain things, who just can't figure out the technology. So those people still need other engagements. But in the last year, it's been really amazing to see how many grandparents are connecting with their grandchildren on FaceTime or on Zoom in ways they probably wouldn't have done a few years ago. A lot of older adults that I've talked to were like, we weren't going to learn it, but now we had to. And now, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to do webinars. We're going to do things. We still want in-person things, but we realize that this is something we can do. And so that has been really exciting. But in, other more traditional things, having, neighborhood groups where people could walk to places, having places like the ACCA, which also provides transportation, which is really helpful for a lot of older adults. But having kind of hubs and areas where people can come together is incredibly helpful because we've seen in some research that people who are lonely are seeing their doctors for social engagement. And not only is that a giant waste of money, right? Doctors are incredibly expensive, but most of the time they're not actually all that great at being social. You don't get a lot of needs met. I mean, unless you love your doctor, which is great, but they don't usually have a lot of time. It's 7 to 8 minutes. And if that's where you're going for social engagements, that's terrible. We can do better. And so I think we've seen really cool creative things in the last year, including, so some of my students are writing letters to Athens community members, and it's a really nice intergenerational thing. And so simple, it costs nothing except a stamp to connect people sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say letter writing, good old fashioned letter writing.
Honestly, it's great for my students to learn. When was the last time they wrote a real letter? Some of them are 17, 18, they don't write real letters. And so it's actually a good skill for them.
Yeah.
And it's great, it's simple.
Thank you for that. And Megan, anything you want to quickly add about COVID, what you guys saw and calls you were getting?
Man, it was just terrifying because every time a disaster happens, even these crazy storms that happen, we think about, like, you can just see, and you probably have this experience, you can just see that client in their home worried and like what's going to happen to them if somebody doesn't see them in or interact with them. And thankfully our senior centers in all the counties, they're really our boots on the ground, and they really stepped up and throughout any of our disaster planning and discussions about what do we do, it was the senior centers that, I mean, they stepped up in ways. They went above and beyond. Every single senior center in our region, and I'm sure in this entire state, they said, we know what we're going to do. And we'll get volunteers. We'll make sure we're bringing food to people. And they were calling us saying, this person is having this need. What can we do? How can we reach out to them? And so we just relied really heavily on all of our providers to recognize the need and make sure to be connecting. And the senior centers were the ones that had to get creative with outreach too, because they were telling us their members, whether it was homebound or people who are coming to the center, that they were wanting the center to like even if it was early on in the pandemic. And so they had to think of ways to, because that's part of their routine. Even if they're independent and they're not homebound, like still taking that senior center away was almost making them homebound again. So they thought of things like they utilized the parking lots of most of the senior centers and did parking lot bingo and parking lot just interactions of trying to stay physically distanced with masks on, but still seeing each other, because just not seeing another person was really, I think, really was having some health impacts. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think there was a lot of creative problem solving and flexibility and adapting that we all had to do. Absolutely. So we've sort of made it through. I mean, I think we're the remnants. I mean, we're in a good, better place than we were a year ago, for sure. And I kind of want to switch gears, just get into the meat of our conversation today. And so when I was telling people, that I was going to be hosting this talk, people who are already caring for a loved one, they just wanted to really say, this is a very overwhelming process for people who, and even this could have happened for people during COVID, their loved one's health might have changed all of a sudden, or someone got relocated, or, or if there's been a gradual change in the family member. And they just said, it's really hard to know what the resources are. It's hard to know how to put a care team together, especially if you're doing it by yourself. I mean, hopefully you have other siblings to help or family members, but I'd love to just dive into that. Whoever wants to start, but just addressing that challenge for people, especially if they're far away from home in another state or country or wherever, Kerstin, you want to just take that?
Sure. My answer is always going to be to find yourself a Megan, right? So Megan is always a good start, but so maybe I'll have her start and then I'll chime in a little bit. You're a really good first stop. You're not you specifically, obviously, but your organization's a really good first stop, and they're everywhere in the country. So maybe you can
I appreciate that. Every time I start talking about area agencies on aging, I think history is fascinating, but it starts to sound like a boring history talk. But the area agencies on aging are available every state, every county in the country. So no matter where you are, you can call an area agency on aging, and they're all called area agencies on aging, AAAs. We go by Aging and Disability Resource Connection. Some call it like some variation of that. But if you ever wanted to look this up, and that's something that I'm happy to do for out-of-state callers too. They'll say, where can I find this information? But in New Mexico, all I really need is what's the county that your loved one lives in, and then we can then thankfully there are ways to find the area agencies on aging that serve that area, the Centers for Independent Living, and I can point you to exactly who to talk to. So we are all around, and that's important because our agency, we're funded through the Older Americans Act, and we are non-biased. We're gonna give you accurate information, and that's really important to us because I think there is a lot of information out there, but it's really not as clear and accurate as organizations such as ours can make that. So we refer to our staff, we're options counselors, because the Division of Aging Services actually created an options counseling certification for us. So we took some classes through Boston University. We had to take an oral exam, a written exam, and there's some other criteria in order to be an options counselor. And I'm not sure if that's the same in all the other area agencies aging out of state, but they are information referral specialists. So they're going to be, they're knowledgeable about the state and local programs, the eligibility criteria, and that's really important. And not only can we talk about those sources, explain Medicaid, how that's different from Medicare, what does Medicare pay for, etc. We can inform about all of the other resources in the area that are our partners. We actually keep a resource database of all of the licensed is important, licensed personal care homes, private home care providers, the senior centers such as Allen, and any resource that serves older adults and individuals with disabilities in a database that all the area agencies on aging in the state have access to. So if you're calling from somewhere in Atlanta, I can still provide that information to you and get you started on the right track. We can print this information out, and what we've been doing a lot during the pandemic is emailing, which I'm grateful for. It saves a lot of paper and it's a lot quicker than somebody having to wait to get the mail. And then we're connected by email and they can ask questions. So we have that information, and that's very unique to our organization. You can Google some of this, but our resource database has it in a comprehensive and non-biased way. For example, for assisted living, we'll have their information. Do they accept pets? What kind of populations do they serve? And a good idea of how much it's going to cost, because that's really important. We want you to be able to understand what the costs are if you're able to afford it, and what some of the options are. What's great is that there are lots of wonderful assisted living, even in our little town of Athens. There's hundreds of private home care providers licensed by the state to provide personal support services. That's a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, coming to the home. And you have options. So we can, and we want to make sure you understand that you have options.
Well said.
I love that focus on options. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, yeah.
I'm really excited because I think for many people, especially the kind of at the initial start of caregiving, you don't even know what you don't know. You might know Medicaid exists and that's the end, but there's so many options, and each community obviously looks very different. So some have more than others. We're incredibly privileged here in Athens, DCCA, but every community has resources and your options. And I think for so many people, when you're first starting out, you're panicked and you don't know what to do, and you might start Googling, but half of the words don't make sense. You don't know if they're up to date. You don't even know, are you eligible for them? I know it's incredibly overwhelming. And what's great, again, about, Megan specifically, yes, but all the staff at the AAAs, that is what they're trained to do, is to give you, here are these options for you that could help you. And that's, I think, a very good comforting thing when you're kind of, I don't want to say always crisis, you're not just calling, but when you're confused and overwhelmed, possibly, it's that first stop. This is always what I tell people to do, is go to the AAA first, because they will give you the list. And then you can start going down that list. Okay, do I want an assisted living? Should they stay in their home? What is it that we really need? Is it financial care? They just gave me these options. What is it that we need to do? But there's such a good first place to give you that wide range, because there's an overwhelming amount of things that often you have to think about. And for some, it's just financial, and that's a little bit more clear cut, but often it is financial, it is medical, it's home maintenance, it's all of those things. And you essentially become, a care manager in some ways and have to put it all together. You need all the best people on that team, and the AAA is a really good team member to start with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, when you're used to being parented and then you become more of the parenting role, that's so interesting to me in your 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, at any time really, when the role reversal happens, or it starts to happen, no one trains us in how to do this, right? And so it can be overwhelming. And also each situation is so unique and so different, and people are aging in their own ways. And that's what's so great about Megan's organization, is that it can customize to whatever like you said, or meet you where you are, and provide that. So in terms of planning, we had talked a little bit about, going back into the family unit. So you've talked to Megan, but then you got to go back and talk to your loved one or the family. That's when the difficult conversations can happen, or maybe they're not difficult. Maybe they're an opportunity to learn more about your wishes of your loved one, or, it could be positive things too. But Kerstin, talk to me a little bit about those difficult conversations and how you might approach them, and what are some examples, and navigate us a little bit through that.
We often call them the kitchen table conversations, because that's often where they happen. And I think you're right, Ellen. Sometimes it's actually wonderful, right? The kids come together, if there's more than one, with the parent, and it can go really well. A lot of people are nervous that it might not go well, and you want to be very prepared going into it. And generally, I'm a overthinker about everything, but for these kinds of conversations, the more prepared you are, the better the conversations go. So you kind of have all your facts ready. You have options. Again, options is key, because you don't want to go in there and tell your parents, be like, here's how it's going to be. That role reversal doesn't go smoothly most of the time, right? You can't all of a sudden become the parent and step in and take away choice for a grown adult, especially when you're a child. Those dynamics really matter. And so again, this is why I love the word options that Megan said, because you can go into that kitchen table and say, there's so many choices. There's a lot of things we can do. What do you think you need help with, right? The older adult comes first is important to remember, which sometimes when we're in our, we're going to solve this problem mode, we would love to come in and be like, here's what you're going to get. I'm going to get you a CNA, and then I'm going to get you this, and I've problem solved it all for you. But it didn't so much take into account that there's a grown person who's going to have to possibly change things pretty dramatically, and that's not an easy thing sometimes.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have fallen in the trap of that myself, and I will say with my own mom, hi mom, it's like, you need to be thinking about this, and kind of pushing your loved one, because you feel like as a parent would, knows best, but we have to honor the individual. It is a person-centered approach, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it is that person's life and choices as best they can make them. And that's the point, is you want to have these options early to make those choices even. But I've learned that lesson too, is when I've pushed a little too much, you get the resistance back, and that's totally valid. And it helps, like you said, pull back to more options and questions and consider, and more of a dialogue than a demand or a direction. I think that's such a good point you're bringing up about.
It's so hard.
Parent,
It's a hard thing.
Parenting, yeah.
I know, and it's hard, especially if you are in a problem-solving mode, which is why doing these conversations not in a crisis is a much better way to go. We have a tendency to only wait until things are really bad, and then we get together and we're like, well, you need to move into a nursing home tomorrow. That is not how anyone wants to go about it, right? Not the kids, not the adult. Instead, if you have these conversations 5, 10, 20 years, if you, and my family member, God, you talk about this at every Thanksgiving table because this is what I love to talk about, but you want to have it kind of when you're calm and you're rational, you can think, you know what, in this situation, if this were to happen, I would want this. And you might be surprised by what you think your parent wants and what your parent actually does want. One of the conversations that I often have is about end of life, which no one wants to talk about, but it's an important conversation. And this book really drove that point home, I think, to a lot of people. But, I might think, well, you want to be cremated, you want a big service. Well, that might not be what that person wants. And it's important to just say, what would you want in this? And to do it in a nice, like non-threatening way. I'm just kind of curious, what is it that you would want in these situations? Or if someday you can't take the stairs in your 2-level house, what would you want to do? Like, how important is the house to you? Things like that. Wills, trusts, the conversations. No one wants to talk about death, money, health. These are uncomfortable conversations for many of us, but if you're having them in an advanced time when you're not stressed out, when there's still those options, and you present it as, I just want to know what you want. So if anything happens, I can make sure your wishes are being, honored, because that is what it should be, right? Again, they're grown adults and they probably have some pretty seriously strong opinions, as they should. And so it's all about you supporting them rather than telling them what to do.
And those difficult this has come up in the previous webinars on legal planning, advanced directives, advanced care planning. So if anybody wants to go back and watch those too, we talk about that a little bit more as well. And Megan, I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper into this question. So something that's come up for us about this dynamic between, parent and child sometimes is a question of, we start to see our loved one maybe not be as steady on their feet, or but they love to walk. They love to go for walks. And then we start to say, well, that's not safe. But then there's a balance of quality of life, and that person, that's a really purposeful, meaningful activity for them. Can you talk a little bit? We probably both can talk about this, but Megan, just talk us through sort of that balancing act as adult children we have to be mindful of, I think, is what's that borderline of when do you sacrifice quality of life and when is it about health? And it's a little murky. So
yeah, and I think what's so important to understand about any loved one you have that's starting to get older is listening to them. I hear a lot and I see a lot that a family member has taken upon themselves. They're like, I'm making this call. I need to know the resources they need, all this stuff. And I'm like, well, does this person know you're calling for them? And most of the time they do, but sometimes they're like, no, I'm just doing it. I got to find this stuff out. And that's totally fine. But what they need to understand is that the care receiver, the individual that is needing help is at the center. And I think we've harped on that, but that is so important. And something that helps me when I'm talking to somebody is thinking about how I would want to be treated. And so with this role reversal is difficult, but also you have to think, what if I'm sitting there in my mother's seat and I'm hearing my family members say these things to me, what do I want? What do I want to hear? And most of the time they want to be able to say, this is what I'm open to. This is what I feel like I need help with. And everything else I think is going fine. And because you might find out that, they are meeting those needs okay, or maybe they just need this thing to be able to manage that. Something that, and I hope this isn't too off topic, but something we've been really working toward in the last few years is introducing assistive technology. So that is really simple devices. It can be simple, can be as complicated as a smartphone, could be as simple as, do I have my glasses? I mean, actually that's pretty advanced, but simple things to help that individual be independent. Because sometimes people think what you have to do is somebody's got to go in there and help them with every moment of their life. Well, that's not something that everybody wants. So finding out what that individual is open to. Do you want to start using a cane? Do you want to start using a walker? What are some reasons that you don't want to? You have to really talk to that individual just like you'd want somebody to talk to you about those options. Now, when it comes to things like canes and walkers, definitely having a conversation, including the doctor. And then the doctor can order therapy. And a therapist is, if you ever get a therapist, if you're ever getting home health care, that is a wonderful opportunity to ask about other things outside of therapy. Say, well, look around my home. Is there anything you see that's unsafe that's going to cause them fall? Things like that. So really the important thing is not assuming what somebody needs. And that's something we don't do either. Sometimes callers want us to give them the answer. This is exactly what you're going to need. But really, like I said earlier, options. We're telling you what we have. And it's up to that care receiver if they want that. Meals on Wheels is not always going to be a good option for somebody. An aide showing up and watching and helping you in the bathroom is not always the option. What are some other options? So, and I really love to see older adults, or individuals with disabilities, receive assistive technology, and it just changes everything. You could do these things on your own that also helps make you more confident in your abilities to manage your own care. So
that's so brilliant you brought that up. Yeah, totally spot on. I mean, because I think we start to see quote unquote decline or change, and we panic, or we think the end, or this is not who they are or supposed to be, and we might overreact or just be more fearful. But I think if we look at a mindset shift a little bit of like, well, how can we meet someone where they are and expand help them continue to have a quality of life where they are now? I think that's really empowering for people. And it's hard for, my own family and my older adults in my life to receive that help. I mean, sometimes it takes a little while to be able to say, okay, I'm ready for the hearing aids. I'm ready for the, these things. So that's okay too, but it's on their time frame. But yeah. Dr. Emerson, anything else you want to add to that?
I think it's probably one of the cruxes of this whole thing, right? Is so if the older adult thinks they're doing fine and you're like, you are in danger, how do you have that conversation, meet in the middle? I think Megan brought up a good point. Sometimes you want to bring in an expert. So I can say to my father-in-law, my God, you can't hear anything. Clearly you're deaf. I'm not going to take that really well for me. If, however, he goes to a checkup and says, can you just check on my hearing? And they have a nice objective measure on hearing. And the doctor says, you know what, a hearing aid may really help. That is a very different dynamic if a physician who has done a test on you does it, rather than me as a daughter-in-law mentioning it. So sometimes it's having an outside person just look, and maybe I'm being overly sensitive, right? Maybe he just doesn't want to hear me. Totally fair. So I don't know. I'm not a physician. And so sometimes it's good to just put an expert in it, have someone consult. Do you think there's a fall hazard? Do you think maybe there's a cognition issue? Things that even the older adult themselves might be worried about, but not being willing to talk to you about as a kid. That can be kind of scary, and you might not have the dynamic who are comfortable doing that. So sometimes getting a professional in there is good. And then the other one really is, okay, if this is your value, and yet I'm worried. So let's say walking is your value, but you have tripped multiple times and fallen, and nothing bad has happened yet, but now I'm really worried about you taking these mile-long walks. On the other hand, that is what you love to do, and it's good for you. It's exercise, right? Everything about walking is so wonderful, and you do it with a friend or whatever it might be. So instead of saying, you need to stop walking, this is clearly a hazard, never going to make it, right? It's that listening to the older adult and say, how can we make it so that I feel a little bit better about it, or we can make sure that you're safe. So is it walking with a friend? Is it taking a cane, along with you just in case, so you have a little bit more stability? Is it maybe not walking in the forest with bumpy roads or in your neighborhood that has bad sidewalks? Instead, maybe you go to a track. We often see the world so black and white in these extremes, especially in parenting, parent-child dynamics that happens somehow more often than not. And instead taking that step back and again, meeting you where you are and saying, I am concerned. This worries me and you've fallen multiple times. I don't want you to have to stop walking. This is great. Can we think about it? Let's get you a walking buddy, or I'll walk with you, or a cane, or whatever it might be. And then if that conversation kind of dissolves a little, sometimes getting a professional that can be really helpful.
That's really good practical advice. Thank you so much for that. I agree. And it isn't black and white. There's shades of gray. There's all kinds of, like you said, options and creative ways you can problem solve this too. That's exciting. I want to get to another hot topic around this, and then we'll open up for questions. Another thing that people have said, please talk about self-care. So let's say, we have a family, a adult child or someone in the family who's been doing this for a while. I mean, not even that long, but they're feeling the effects personally of carrying that load, or maybe a physical demanding situation, or emotionally, mentally. Can we talk about that? Megan, what should people do? I mean, where do you start? And just even maybe just starting with recognizing that something's going on, because isn't there research that talks about a caregiver is more likely to be sick and have higher mortality than the person they're caring for?
I don't want to scare anybody.
No.
But I have to say, I can't tell you, I don't know if it's just been the last few years, but how often we get a call that says, well, so and so, they had a caregiver, but they got sick themselves or they passed away, and now we need to figure things out. And so now, continuing to be there for somebody is not the only reason to keep yourself healthy, but if that's a motivation for you, then that is great. Self-care is very difficult. I think that it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of making mistakes. And so I myself am somebody who's been on a self-care journey for a long time, because I think it's and I don't know if it goes into personality types or anything like that, but sometimes you feel like you are the only one who can provide the care. Only you know how to do this. And I think maybe parents can speak to that a little bit. It might be hard to allow, the first time you let your child go and stay with somebody and things like that. You really think, well, really though, I am the best caregiver. And that maybe that is true, but you have to recognize that your care receiver is not the only one who goes to the doctor. You also, and men, women, everybody needs to go to their doctor's appointments. I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. You need to have checkups. You need to have blood work. You need to be making sure everything is going fine for you. I hear a lot of caregivers, sometimes they say, well, I have pains. I have this, I have that. And of course, we're not medical experts, but I think, and I always ask them, does your doctor know about this? Well, I don't have a primary care doctor. And then we go into that conversation. Everyone needs to have, and there are lots of resources for access to primary care. I want to give up, I'm not connected to Medlink. I told you we're all unbiased information, but Medlink, they're federally qualified health centers. They are all over our region, and I'm sure they're all over our state and anywhere else in the country, federally qualified health centers, and they are wraparound services. They offer sliding scale medical care, and some of our Medlinks offer behavioral health, so mental health services, which is another part of self-care. So we go to the doctor, we get our blood work, we get our blood pressure, make sure everything's good. And also, you need to recognize that caregiving, especially once you're starting out, that is a major life change. And it's important to be recognizing changes in your own mental health. So what's great about primary care too is that you can talk to the primary care doctor and let them know that you might be having symptoms of depression, that you are feeling anxious, because all of that affects will affect your physical health needs as well. And so that primary care doctor can refer you to treatments for mental health. That could be talk therapy. That could be support groups. We have wonderful support groups in our region. You can go and talk with other people. I think a lot of them have been on Zoom, but they also can be face-to-face normally. And you're talking with other people who are going through the same thing. And that is for everybody. That's such a powerful, you will have no idea how good you will feel after you have talked about this with somebody. I hear a lot of times people say they just sound like we end up on the phone for a long time because they haven't talked to anybody about these and I don't like to call it a burden, but caregiving is really hard. And they when you don't have anyone to even just tell about, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm sad today because I have to go do this instead of something I want to do for myself. And so recognizing that before it gets too bad, before you get too dark of a hole, is very important. Having family and friends around, reaching out to them, making sure they understand what you're doing so that you're not doing it alone. I promise you, if you reach out to people, they want to help. They really, really want to help. Sometimes they can help with hands-on care. They come and sit with your care receiver. Sometimes they can provide financial help. They can send, there's what is it, Grubhub and all these other companies now. They can deliver food. Actually, we've been hearing a lot about that during the pandemic. Before somebody gets on Meals on Wheels, they say, well, we've been sending food boxes and Publix and that delivery and things like that. So there are lots of different ways that people around you can help you, but mostly with being able to talk to them. Being able to talk about what's going on with you is so important. Don't keep it in here. Don't, because then you won't have anyone to talk to. You might build up resentment for the person that you love and that you're caring for too. So, and we don't want that. So, and same for your care receiver. When they go to the doctor, they also need to tell the doctor if they're having any feelings of depression, anxiety, sadness in general. That's very important to keep tabs on. But as much as you keep tabs on your care receiver, keeping tabs on yourself.
Very well said. And I'm thinking, I think the COVID year almost gave us all permission to verbalize that even more. I mean, we've always been able to and encouraged to, but now that we've all felt that mental health of components and physical components so acutely, I think it's more, there's no fewer stereotypes or myths around that. It's just like, be honest with your feelings and you'll feel better, and or you're not alone in any of that, so all of what you said, the support groups, the creating this village, the community of support around you, there's no shame in that. Because I've seen in my work, family bringing in folks to the senior center, their loved one, and just the relief of knowing that adult day health or the senior center is there so they can go to work or they can go run errands. I mean, basic things that sometimes you don't actually not able to do once maybe you have someone who really is full-time care and you haven't figured out the resources yet. So everything you said is just super excellent. Kerstin, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, that's beautifully said and so important. And I love that you raised it, because I don't think we talk about that as enough. You put your own life mask on first for a reason. You want to care, to be the best caregiver, you care for yourself as well. So all the things you want to do for your loved one, do those for yourself, right? You make sure your loved one gets to the doctor. You make sure they're doing all these things. You have to do that too. And sometimes, especially for full-time caregivers, it just gets overwhelming and it doesn't feel like there's any downtime. So getting respite care can obviously really help. And I always encourage people who are caregivers, even if it's not full-time, is to schedule self-care time. You schedule everything else, make that a priority. And if you schedule it, then you have no excuse. And self-care looks vastly different, right? Some people need a bubble bath. Some people need to be by themselves. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Sometimes it is just taking a walk. But things like support groups is usually my first recommendation, because a lot of times as a caregiver, it feels isolating, especially, my gosh, in the last year, it's probably felt that way. And you often feel like you're the only one doing this. But guess what? Millions of other people are doing it. And if you're talking to others, it can feel so empowering to realize it's not just me. Lots of people are feeling that way. And a lot of times I've noticed in the caregiver support groups, the other caregivers will push you to do self-care. And sometimes that peer pressure is really good. We love to be martyrs and to be the ones who sacrifice everything, and that's great, but not at the expense of your own mental and physical health. And so I love when support groups members come in and say, when was the last time you took care of yourself? Use the respite services, use technology, use grocery delivery, whatever it is that you need, and you take an hour and you do nothing for anybody else but yourself. I don't care if it's watching bad TV or whatever it might be. You do that and you schedule it. So there's no excuse not to, because a lot of times we push ourselves to the last of the priority, which is wonderful. And honestly is what makes us great humans, right? The fact that we're even on these caregiving journeys, it's amazing and it makes us wonderful, but it also burns us out, especially long-term. We have to remember with caregiving, a lot of times it is not a sprint not a sprint. Clearly I'm not a runner. It's not the fast one, it's the longer one, it's the marathon. And you have to take care of yourself. If you don't stop to get water breaks and get snacks and things along the way, then you're not going to make it. So people need to just be really forgiving of themselves, giving themselves that opportunity, that grace, all those things. And I love that Megan called it a self-care journey, because I do think it's not one time, hey, I got my 8 hours off for the day, I'm back. And no, it's a journey. And you need practice, and you need to kind of schedule it in there and sometimes force yourself to do that.
Well said. Yeah, over time you learn what you need and what works for you. That's part of the journey too, you know. And I think, and this advice goes really to people caregiving, and it's not their loved one, it's their job. I mean, we're in a profession where we're working in the front lines, and that's just definitely important. But I think our culture is finally seeing that it's beneficial for everyone, because we're all giving and nurturing and, doing things in our own ways in our own lives. So all this advice is really great. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to open this up for anyone on the call who has a question. There's so much more we could talk about. It's just endless, but I think we've really hit the high notes and really some great strategies and advice and insight and mindset shifts that we've been able to talk about today. But does anyone, you're able to unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand, or you can write in the chat box. So if anybody has anything. Sometimes it takes a minute to. Anybody? No, it's me. Well, while you might be trying to figure out the technology, anything else you can think of that we haven't covered that would be useful for folks who are just starting on the journey or have been in the journey a while?
I want to just one quick, very simple thing that I often tell people when it's long distance is, if you can, is get a neighbor's telephone number or someone in the town's telephone number. Give them yours so they can contact you. It's such a simple thing. And I know a lot of times we live in a world where we don't know our neighbors. I've had people just put a note in their mailbox and say, I know you don't know me, but I'm your next door neighbor's daughter, and I just want you to have my phone number in case something happens, or if you see anything, like if you see the newspapers piling up or something, you can just send me a text. I'm not going to, you're not in charge or anything, but if you could just communicate with me, that's a really simple thing that can sometimes help.
That's a really good point. Actually, I have in a situation too with a parent who's 1,000 miles away, and I worry so much. Is he okay and lonely and engaged enough and living? He's very purposeful in his work, but sometimes I have to trust that people show up unexpectedly to help. Mm-hmm. His neighbor has a dog that he goes to walk. It's like that. I didn't arrange that. That just showed up in his life. And that he just loves dogs. So trusting that there are good people around your loved one who will step in is also kind of a leap of faith, but it does happen.
A lot of times it's that reaching out, just try. I mean, we have a neighbor who I did not know needed help, and I randomly ran into his daughter on a walk, and she asked if we could just send on my children a little, and so they draw pictures for him and just give him a picture. And he doesn't like talking to people particularly, but he clearly needs to a little bit, and so whenever he's out we say hello, but we also just put things in his mailbox every now and then. And it's such a simple thing for us to do. We just didn't know he needed it. And so I think Megan said it, you have to ask, right? You have to reach out, and you shouldn't feel awkward as a caregiver to ask, even if it's just say, here's my number. I would feel better if a neighbor had a contact information for me.
Great idea. Okay, so Rachel, I see your hand raised. Let me let you ask your question. Hi.
Hey, hi. Thank you for this really wonderful conversation. I've appreciated it. So I'm a healthcare provider here in town, and I feel like even though I am, sometimes both me and my husband we're still at a loss for how to provide and help with my parents. So we just transitioned my parents to an independent living community here in town, which has been really wonderful and helpful. And I feel like we did implement some of the ways that you kind of, touched upon by helping with that transition. But one of the questions I do have, my dad has a chronic neurological medical condition, is, some maybe technological apps or ways. He's got a lot of medications, ways for them to keep everything organized so that, if he loses his piece of paper with all his medication on it, he hasn't quite figured out how to download everything onto his smartphone, and I've tried to find the app for him, but it's a little too complicated. If you have a, an easy solution, something like that, to keep everything kind of neat and organized in one way so they can bring it to their provider, or I have access to it because I am on their HIPAA.
Hmm. So my coworkers Tasha and Katura, they know about the assistive technology a little bit more than me, like the specific options. Definitely, it would probably be something that is on a tablet or a smartphone. I can get your contact information and ask them to follow up with you. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what would be available in an app store, but I will. But if you can give me your contact information, I can get them to follow up with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd actually love to know the specific apps as well. So apps can be really helpful, although, the world of medical record keeping was supposed to change all of this for us. Obviously, that has not worked out quite the way that we thought, but I know that some healthcare providers are doing their own apps as well, which is obviously the better choice, because then theoretically everything just auto-populates, because you putting in medications that may or may not change. The problem with the apps too is they need to get updated, and people have a tendency to not update those. So apps are great. It's better if they populate through your healthcare provider. And so if the healthcare provider at all, like if they're part of Piedmont, whatever it might be, they might already have something. And if they do, that's vastly preferred. But if you are on it as well, so that was actually before you mentioned I'm a HIPAA, you're on their power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. That's fantastic. That is another thing you can do way ahead of the game, not in the last minute when there's a crisis and you need them to sign something. Instead, get on it now. Make sure you're the durable power of attorney for healthcare so that you can access those files if you need to. You can talk to the doctor if you need to, because if you don't have those rights, no one's going to share medical information with you. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's an easy thing to do in advance. And that way, if you do use an app, make sure you have the login information as well, whether it's through the healthcare or not, because that way you can kind of monitor as well. Almost all banks and things, financial institutions have this set up a little bit better than healthcare does. So they have auditing privileges for a lot of the bank options, the larger ones at least do. So you can kind of monitor if you need to for people who are having trouble managing their finances. They're a little bit more advanced. I had high hopes for the electronic medical records to be this magic thing, and it hasn't yet. I still hope that it will someday, because yes, we still could see people just bringing either their brown paper bags full of medications to the doctors, or big brown paper, depending on what their health conditions are, or the crumpled pieces of paper that, again, who knows when those were updated last, and who knows if you got exactly the right information. You really want the healthcare provider to provide that and to constantly update it. But if Megan has really good apps, I'd actually love to know about them as well, because I think that is a solution for many of us now.
Yeah, organizing medical information. Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. I see one question in the chat box. Could you speak a little more about the importance of getting legal documents, details in place? So that's, again, the advanced planning. I think the unanimous decision is like, yes, have it in place as early as you can, because it sounds like in this situation, loved ones dealing with this right now, finding original wills and fighting to get on bank accounts. And, it sounds like a little bit of a scrambling moment. So yeah, I mean, having the power of attorney, knowing where the will is, having that set up really can help, especially later if something's going on and there's a lot of stress and confusion. Make it simple for yourself as early as possible to avoid that, right? Is that what you would?
Yeah, people love a good lockbox to keep all their things in, but if no one knows the key to that lockbox, the code, that isn't going to help anybody, right? So you can have all the paperwork in place. If you can't get into that lockbox, that is a problem. Or if you don't even know if there is one. So yes, you want to get the paperwork in place, like durable power of attorneys. All of that are really important. And Georgia has, lots of the stuff on the Division of Aging Services website. There's certainly people who can help guide you through it. But then it's that conversation again. You want to talk to your parents about, do you have a pension? So it's amazing how many people don't collect on pensions because they didn't realize that, the widow didn't realize that they were eligible for a pension. So ask those questions, do you have a pension? Do you have paperwork? Do you have a living will? They may have filled one out, just never bothered to tell you, which certainly happens. What are the things? Do you have a lawyer? Did you write a will? Did you save it on your computer? If so, could I possibly have your computer password? There's also a lot about kind of digital advanced planning. So people are really big on social media now. What happens if they have an accident? Would you want to be able to, would they want you to log into their, they might not, right? But would you want someone else to be able to access your social media or your email? So when my father passed away, no one knew his passwords to anything, including his email at work, which was, that one turned out to be slightly important because there were a lot of things on there. He was unexpected passing, so he had not prepared for it. So those are, again, conversations to have lots and lots in the early stages. And, you know, you might not want to jump right in and get every single password for everything. You might not be ready for that. But, you know, some of the important ones, in addition to the kind of the living will and the healthcare power of attorney, thinking about the regular wills as well, and financial power of attorney. Some banks like to have their own forms, even though you can have the financial power of attorney, but I think Bank of America is one. Some of the bigger banks want their own forms. So get those done now. A lot of times you can just honestly go to the bank with your loved one, say, here's our situation, here's what we need, and they will work with you on it. And then you'll have everything set in advance. You might not need to have power to get all the money out. They might not want you to have that. Totally fair. But can you, if an emergency, can you access the funds? You know, do you know where the healthcare information is? Things like that. And it's that advanced planning, uncomfortable conversations. They're important. You should see our Thanksgiving Day conversations in my house. I always bring something up. But people expect it.
To our house and help. Great. I think let's have one more question, Vivian. I see you've raised your hand, and then we'll wrap things up. And I will send out your contact information for folks to get in touch with you if they have follow-up questions, if that's okay. Okay, so Vivian, can you hear us? Hey, Vivian. I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for all the resource information. I was going to ask for contact information at this point too. Megan, you're available through email only, or is there an office that person face-to-face contact?
Yeah. So we are located at 305 Research Drive, and that's here on the east side. So if you know where the YWCO is, our building is sort of it's kind of hard to see a little bit, but it's kind of up a hill. We're in the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission, but that's exactly where our office is where I am right now. You can call us directly. Our phone number, our toll-free number is 1-800-474-7540. And our local number that I usually will give out is 706-583-2546. And then my email is my first initial and last name. So M as in Megan, V as in Victor, O, G as in Go, and T as in Tom, at it's going to be the acronym for Northeast Georgia Regional Commission. So N as in name, E, R as in Richard. Did I do that right? N-E-G. Nope. G as in Go, R as in Richard, C as in cat, .org. And I'll grab a card to put that up real quick in the camera. So if you didn't catch that, because sometimes it's very hard to hear our entire emails over the phone. Sometimes it's obvious I talk on the phone. Hang on, let me grab that card.
And her organization is called AAA, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's the Area Agency on Aging. We try to, oh my gosh, is that going to be in focus at all? No.
I'll just wait for Allie to sit.
I'll put it in the chat too. So our organization is the Northeast Georgia Area Agency on Aging, and so you can call us the AAA, but we have so many acronyms. We try to get away from using a lot of acronyms because it sounds at some point you'll read our notes sometimes and they'll say like AFib, cabbage, SOS, and you're like, what are you talking about? So
Is there research, is there a website with your information on it? I always would assume.
So our website is www.negrc.org. And that's for the regional commission. And then you can go to aging. That's the part of the website that we're on.
It's NERO.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's N as in name, and then R is in, I keep doing that, I'm sorry, N-E-G, I keep missing the G. So G is in go, R is in Richard, C is in cat, .org.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Emerson had mentioned the Division of Aging Services website. Let me see exactly, because I always just type in Division of Aging Services, but the Division of Aging Services website has information about the statewide programs, and that website is aging, so AGING .Georgia spelled out .gov, and that is a great resource because they also have some of these documents that we were discussing, such as the power of attorney, and they have some really good handouts about specific things we were discussing, the Medicaid programs and everything like that. And I'll put that in the chat as well.
And Dr. Emerson, your agency works directly with students at the University of Georgia, but also works with the public.
Yes, we actually try really hard to combine those two things, because a lot of times, especially in Athens, it seems very separate. But one of our missions is to try to make sure that our students and us engage with the community as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for these great questions. And thank you both, Kerstin and Megan. It's just, we're so grateful to have you in the community doing what you do. You're so good at what you do, and are part of this wonderful network, of this village that we have to help support others. I just wanted to end on one final note, and it's something, Megan, that you said in a conversation we had a few days ago, that helping a parent can look many different ways. I love that so much. That's such a freeing thing. It's like, you don't have to be all things. You don't have to take all that on. You could be the financial person. You could be the social person. You could be the care coordinator person, or any of the above. And so I just really like to leave with that, you know, whatever way you can help your loved one is great, and that there are resources to help you do that. So I think we've really seen that there's a vast network across the country. Whatever the situation is, that is a great starting point. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all this, and hopefully this is very helpful for people, and I'll have them come to you if they have further questions. But thank you so much for your time today, and everyone joining. It's fabulous, and we're ending our series on this, and I think it's been a wonderful talk. So
Thank you so much. It was a true pleasure. Thank you.
absolutely. And thank you, Megan, too.
Thank you, Alan. This was awesome.
Good. Enjoyed it as well. All right. Well, I will be talking to you all soon, and seeing others. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all. Have a good day.
Thank you.